Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something that has always kind of fascinated me,
Oh, yeah.
the Shakespeare authorship question.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at specifically excerpts from Jodi Picoult's novel By Any Other Name.
Right.
It's a fictional account, but she does a lot of historical research, and we're going to be supplementing that with just some historical details about Shakespeare himself and the whole authorship question.
Sounds good.
So in Picoult's novel, she puts forth a new candidate for the authorship, a woman named Amelia Bassano.
Interesting. Someone most people probably haven't heard of.
Yeah, Amelia Bassano. So who was she?
Well, she was a real person.
Okay.
She was a Jewish woman. She was living in London during the Elizabethan era,
Wow.
and actually she was a published poet.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of interesting. And you're thinking about her as a possible author of Shakespeare's plays.
Yeah. And, that was a time when women, weren't really encouraged to be writers or even educated in many cases. So what was it about Amelia's life that led Picoult to believe that she might be a good candidate?
Well, so Picoult in her novel really emphasizes Amelia's intelligence.
Okay.
She was also very well educated, which was pretty unusual for a woman at that time.
Right.
And her family actually had connections at court. They were musicians.
Oh, wow.
So, she had access to the kind of world that most women just couldn't even dream of.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the political intrigue,
Yeah.
all the gossip. And she was probably exposed to a lot of, the lives of the rich and powerful.
Right. And so that would have given her kind of that insider knowledge that would have been valuable for a playwright.
Exactly.
Okay.
Crafting stories about courtly life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Political machinations, things like that. And not only that, but, she had that great education. And so she had the linguistic skills, the knowledge of history and literature that is so evident in Shakespeare's works.
Okay. So she's a more compelling candidate than I initially thought.
Right.
But what about Shakespeare himself? What are the doubts surrounding his authorship, and how do they connect to Amelia?
So there's this group of scholars known as anti-stratfordians who have questioned the traditional story about Shakespeare.
Okay.
As the sole author of the plays and poems, they point to inconsistencies in his biography.
Okay.
For example, he came from pretty humble origins. He didn't have much formal education.
Right.
And that seems kind of at odds with the depth and breadth of knowledge that we see in his works.
So they basically think that someone else might have been the author, or at least a collaborator.
Right, maybe someone who had more education, maybe more courtly connections.
Yeah.
Like Amelia. And Picoult really explores this possibility in her novel.
So what kind of specific historical details does she use to support this idea?
Well, she looks at Amelia's relationships and experiences.
Okay.
And she tries to draw some parallels between what happened in Amelia's life and some of the themes that we see in Shakespeare's plays.
Okay.
So, for example, we know that Amelia had this complex relationship with Lord Hunsdon,
Right.
Lord Chamberlain,
Right.
and that position had a lot of power.
In the theater world. Yeah.
Right. So this connection that she had with Lord Hunsdon gave her access to, theater productions, playwrights. She could see how everything worked behind the scenes.
So would she have known other playwrights then?
It's quite possible. Picoult even goes so far as to suggest a connection between Amelia and Christopher Marlowe,
Wow.
often referred to as Kit.
Right, Kit Marlowe. Yeah.
Yeah, and she portrays them as having this very collaborative, very intellectual relationship,
Okay.
even hinting that they might have worked together on some of the plays.
Wow. So we have a woman who is well educated, has connections to the court, connections to the theater, and potentially collaborating with a known playwright. So this is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
But how does Picoult go beyond these circumstantial connections?
Right.
Does she offer any evidence?
Well, so remember how we mentioned that Amelia was a published poet?
Yeah.
Well, one of the key pieces of evidence that Picoult points to is a poem that Amelia wrote about Venus and Adonis.
Okay.
And this theme was also explored in a poem that was published under Shakespeare's name.
Interesting.
And what's particularly interesting about both of these poems is that they kind of play with traditional gender roles. They depict the woman as the pursuer.
Okay.
And that's a theme that we see in many of Shakespeare's plays as well.
So it's like she's drawing a direct line from Amelia's creative process
Right.
to the ideas that appear in Shakespeare's work,
Yeah.
suggesting something more than just coincidence.
And it's not just this one poem.
Mm-hmm.
Picoult really delves into the literary analysis. She compares the style, the themes, even specific phrases used in Amelia's poetry to those found in Shakespeare's plays.
Okay.
And she highlights some intriguing similarities
Yeah.
that seem to support her theory.
So we're building a case, albeit circumstantial, for Amelia's possible involvement.
Right.
What kind of research did Picoult do to back up these claims, though?
So Picoult is known for doing really, really meticulous research.
Okay.
And she went to a lot of trouble to make sure that her portrayal of Amelia, her portrayal of the Elizabethan era, was accurate.
Yeah.
So she describes, going to archives and consulting with historians,
Right.
even studying the handwriting from that time period.
Wow.
So she really dug deep to try to find some evidence that could back up this theory.
So what did she find?
Well, one really interesting thing that she uncovered was this diary of Simon Forman,
Okay.
who was an astrologer and doctor who lived at the same time as Amelia.
Right.
And his writings actually shed light on Amelia's life. Her relationship with Lord Hunsdon,
Mm-hmm.
other personal details that just give this fascinating glimpse into her world.
It's amazing to think that these personal accounts from centuries ago could help us unravel this mystery.
Absolutely. And Picoult also introduces these fascinating details about a set of miniature portraits
Okay.
that were discovered in an archive. And one of these portraits is believed to be of Amelia.
Miniature portraits. How do those tie into all of this?
Well, on the back of these portraits are playing cards,
Okay.
which might seem like a small detail. But Picoult uses this to delve into this world of cardamancy,
Okay.
which is the practice of using playing cards for divination.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And she suggests that these cards might actually hold a hidden message.
Wait, so the playing cards on the back of the portraits could be a secret code?
Potentially.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Tell me more about this cardamancy thing. I've never really heard of this.
So cardamancy, much like tarot, assigns specific meanings to each card.
Okay.
So, for example, the Six of Hearts, which is found on the back of a portrait believed to be of the young Earl of Southampton, is often associated with a broken heart or impossible love.
Southampton, the patron of Shakespeare.
That's right. And the fact that this particular card is found on his portrait, alongside a portrait of Amelia, raises some questions
Yeah, it does.
about their relationship and their connection to this whole authorship question.
So we have a potential love connection between Amelia and Southampton. Okay, this is getting interesting.
Right.
We have connections between Amelia, Shakespeare, Southampton, hinted at through historical records, literary analysis, and playing card symbolism.
It definitely makes you wonder if there's more to this story than we realize.
Yeah.
Could this all just be coincidence? Or is Picoult pointing to a hidden truth about the authorship of Shakespeare's works?
That is a fantastic question, and one we'll need to explore further as we delve deeper into the evidence and arguments surrounding Amelia's possible authorship. But before we jump to conclusions, I want to take a closer look at what Picoult reveals about Amelia's life and how her experiences might have informed the works attributed to Shakespeare.
So one of the key turning points for Amelia, at least the way Picoult tells it, is her time as a ward of the Countess of Sussex.
Right. She goes there when she's pretty young, 7 years old.
7, yeah. And the Countess exposes her to this really unusual education for a girl at that time.
Right. Picoult really emphasizes that. How does that compare to Shakespeare? We think about his background.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We don't know a ton about Shakespeare's education.
Right.
But most scholars believe that he probably went to a grammar school
Okay.
where he would study Latin, classical literature, that kind of thing.
Right.
Solid foundation,
Right.
but it wouldn't have exposed him to all the knowledge that we see in the plays.
Right. The Countess, she kind of went above and beyond. Oh, yeah. What kinds of things was Amelia studying with her?
So the Countess is portrayed as having this really progressive view of education.
Okay.
She didn't see why a girl couldn't study the same things as a boy.
Right.
So Amelia, in addition to languages, she studied history, philosophy,
Yeah.
even astronomy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really well-rounded education.
And I wonder if those lessons, did they spark a passion for knowledge that later found its way into the plays?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Picoult also highlights how Amelia, through the Countess, is exposed to London society.
Yeah.
So you can imagine her walking through the streets, seeing rich and poor, public executions. She's seeing it all.
That's a very vivid world.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And of course, the theater district.
Right.
All that energy.
Right. And that's something that Shakespeare, even with a limited education, could have drawn on too, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Picoult shows Shakespeare as really being a keen observer of human nature.
Right.
Someone who could, like, absorb those stories
Yeah.
and turn them into drama.
Yeah.
But she contrasts that with Amelia, who's more intellectual in her approach.
Okay, so even though they're seeing maybe some of the same events, the same themes, their perspective is different.
Right.
Their approach to those experiences.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that might be a key to understanding this whole authorship debate.
Okay.
So think about the way women are portrayed in Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just one-dimensional characters.
No.
They're complex, intelligent, often driven by ambition, a desire for agency.
Yeah, you think about like Rosalind in As You Like It or Lady Macbeth.
Right, exactly.
Very strong women.
Strong women, defying social expectations. Now imagine Amelia living in that time,
Yeah.
when women's roles are really limited, seeing these plays, seeing these characters come to life.
Yeah.
Do you think that might have resonated with her in a way that maybe a male playwright wouldn't have grasped?
That's a really interesting point. It's like she's seeing her own struggles, her own aspirations.
Right.
And maybe she's using the plays to give voice to those experiences.
Exactly. And Picoult reinforces that by highlighting these events in Amelia's life that mirror the themes in the plays.
Right.
For instance, she's forced into this relationship with Lord Hunsdon.
Right.
She's basically his mistress, even though they don't call her that. And it's all about survival for her.
Yeah, that's really sad.
It is, yeah.
But you see that power dynamic at play in a lot of Shakespeare's plays.
Right.
That ambition, love, duty,
Yeah, exactly.
characters making difficult choices.
And Picoult even goes further. She describes this scene where Amelia is caught in a storm at sea.
Oh, yeah, I remember that scene.
Yeah. She's traveling to Denmark, and she's dealing with this very personal, very feminine issue.
Right.
And she's surrounded by men who have no clue.
It's such a small detail, but I thought it was so powerful.
Yeah.
It felt so real, so human.
Exactly. And it really highlights that lived experience that could have informed those female characters.
Right, right.
And then there's this whole collaboration with Marlowe that Picoult suggests.
Yeah.
Imagine these two just bouncing ideas off each other, you know, challenging each other, creating this amazing work together.
That's such a cool image.
Right.
But wouldn't there be some record of their collaboration?
Well, that's the mystery.
Yeah.
Picoult suggests that Amelia, you know, as a woman in that society, she might have chosen to remain anonymous.
Right, to protect herself.
To protect herself, her work.
To protect her work, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe Shakespeare was more of a frontman.
Right.
He's lending his name to the plays, but she's the one behind the scenes.
That's the theory.
Wow.
And she has Amelia negotiating with Shakespeare
Oh, really?
to get a share of the profits,
Okay.
but also maintaining that anonymity.
But what about the fact that Shakespeare's name is on the plays when they're printed?
Right. So that's a key point that the anti-stratfordians bring up.
Yeah.
They argue that printing back then wasn't as regulated.
Okay.
You know, there wasn't copyright.
Right.
And so often plays were attributed to whoever is going to sell the most copies.
So basically they're using his name because it's going to make more money.
It's possible.
It's possible.
It's a possibility. And several of the plays were actually published anonymously at first
Right.
and only later attributed to Shakespeare.
So why, if he's so famous, why wouldn't they put his name on it right away?
Exactly. It's a discrepancy that adds fuel to this whole debate.
Right, right.
And let's not forget those historical records that place Shakespeare in the theater world.
Right.
We see him as an actor, a shareholder. We even have legal documents related to his work.
So he's definitely involved somehow.
Right.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a valid argument on both sides. What about arguments against Amelia as the author?
Well, one of the main criticisms is that we just don't have that direct evidence.
Right.
You know, we have her poetry, we have the diary entries mentioning her,
Yeah.
but there's no smoking gun,
Right.
no letter, no manuscript that explicitly links her to those plays.
And that's the problem with historical mysteries. Sometimes we're just stuck with the pieces we have.
Right. And while Picoult's story is compelling, it does rely on interpretation and speculation.
Yeah.
Some critics say the connections she draws are just too tenuous,
Okay.
that they could just be coincidences.
So where does that leave us? It seems like we have good points on both sides, but no definitive answers.
Well, I think that's what makes this debate so fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes you think critically.
Yeah.
You have to weigh the evidence. And we have to acknowledge that history isn't always clear-cut.
Right.
There are different perspectives, different interpretations, and sometimes the truth is really hard to find.
So what do you think?
Me,
Yeah.
after looking at all this, where do you land? I have to say, I'm fascinated by both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
I think the traditional view of Shakespeare has merit.
Yeah.
But the possibility that someone like Amelia played a role, even if it was behind the scenes, that's really intriguing.
It's like we're being asked to rethink everything we thought we knew about Shakespeare.
Right.
And even if we don't solve the mystery, I think the process of exploring it, that's the fun part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes us question those narratives that we've always been told.
Right. Right.
And who knows, maybe one day some new evidence will surface that'll give us more answers.
Until then, we can just speculate,
Yeah.
Think about the possibilities, those conversations that might have happened,
Yeah.
and just appreciate the power of those plays, whoever wrote them.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the plays are what matter.
Yeah.
They still speak to us. Centuries later, they talk about love, loss, ambition, all those things that make us human.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway here. Whether Shakespeare did it all himself or whether Amelia had a hand in it, the plays themselves, they're undeniable.
Yeah, it's a reminder that great art can last. It can transcend time, authorship, all of that. It keeps inspiring us, keeps making us think long after the person who created it is gone.
That's a great point. And for everyone listening, if you're interested in this, go explore it. Read Picoult's novel. Read Amelia's poetry.
Yeah.
Look at both sides of the debate, See what you think.
Well, we do have to look at the other side of the coin here.
All right.
There's a pretty substantial body of evidence that supports the traditional view of Shakespeare as the sole author.
Okay.
Like his name appears on a lot of those title pages of the plays published when he was alive.
Right. That seems like strong evidence. What do the doubters say about that?
Well, the anti-stratfordians,
Yeah.
they suggest that those title pages, they might not be as definitive as we think.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. Publishing was different back then.
Yeah.
Way less regulated.
Right.
So a playwright's name on the title page, maybe that was more about marketing than authorship.
Oh.
Like today, you see a movie poster, you see the producer's name. Right.
Right. Doesn't mean they wrote the script.
So you're saying maybe they used Shakespeare's name because it was going to sell more plays?
It's a possibility. And, some of the plays, they were published anonymously at first.
Right.
And then later on, they were attributed to Shakespeare.
So if he was so well known, why not put his name on all of them right from the start?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It keeps that debate going.
Right.
And let's not forget, we do have all those records
Yeah.
that put Shakespeare right there in the theater world. He was an actor, shareholder. We've got legal documents. He's definitely involved somehow.
So he's part of it. Okay, so it sounds like there's good points on both sides.
Yeah.
What about the arguments against Amelia?
Well, the biggest one. We don't have direct proof. We have her poetry. We've got those diary entries.
Yeah.
But there's no clear link, no letter, no manuscript that definitively connects her to Shakespeare's plays. I guess that's the thing with historical mysteries. It's all about the pieces we have. We have to work with what we've got.
Exactly. And Picoult's novel, as engaging as it is, it does rely on interpretation, on speculation.
Okay.
Some critics would say, look, the connections she makes, they're just too thin. Maybe it's all coincidence.
So where does that leave us? Good arguments on both sides. No clear answers.
I think that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah.
You have to really think critically. You have to weigh the evidence.
Yeah.
And realize history isn't always so black and white. Different perspectives, different interpretations. Sometimes the truth is hard to pin down.
It really makes you think. So after diving into this, I'm curious, where do you stand? Do you lean one way or the other?
Honestly,
Uh-huh.
I'm captivated by both sides. The traditional view has its strengths,
Right.
but that possibility of someone like Amelia working behind the scenes, that's really compelling.
It's like we're re-examining everything we thought we knew about this huge figure in literature.
Yeah.
And even if we never have a definitive answer, the exploration, that's the rewarding part.
Absolutely. It challenges those established narratives, makes us question what we've always been told, and who knows, maybe someday new evidence will pop up and it'll finally give us those answers we're looking for.
That would be amazing. But until then, we can speculate, think about the what-ifs, imagine those behind-the-scenes conversations that might have taken place.
Right.
And just enjoy the plays, regardless of who actually wrote them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the plays, They're what matters.
Yeah,
Centuries later, they still speak to us. Love, loss, ambition, all the things that make us human.
they really do. And maybe that's the real point here.
Yeah.
Whether Shakespeare worked solo or whether Amelia was involved, the legacy of those plays, it's undeniable.
Right. It shows us that great art can last.
Mm.
It goes beyond time, authorship, all of that. It keeps inspiring us, making us think long after the writer is gone.
That's a beautiful thought. And for everyone listening, if this deep dive has sparked your interest, dig in, explore it more. Read Picoult's novel, read Amelia's poetry, delve into the arguments for and against. You never know what you might uncover.